Hi there, welcome to Get Lit, a program to celebrate Bay Area authors. My name is Pete Crooks. I'm senior editor and senior writer at Diablo magazine. And today on Get Lit we have Joshua Braff, a terrific Oakland-based writer who is the author of the 2004 book The Unthinkable Thoughts of Jacob Green and 2010's Peep Show. Welcome, Joshua. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Well, not only are you here to talk about your brand new book, but you are also teaching writers here in the East Bay at St. Mary's College. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Just recently, without even setting out any flares that I was interested, although I am interested in teaching and have taught quite a bit in my life, an old professor, I went there from 95 to 97, the first MFA program that St. Mary's had, and one of my teachers who's still there said, "How'd you like to teach craft of fiction, a postgraduate level class? There would be poets, there would be short story writers and novelists." And I jumped at it. Teaching is a great way to learn, and also as a writer there's a great deal of time that's spent by yourself. And here I have colleagues, you know, very talented people, some of them, all of them, that I can talk to, and we dissect novels, and we talk about sentences and transitions and all the little intricacies that go into making a novel move and be remembered by people. So I'm really enjoying it.
So let's talk about your books. Peep Show came out in June of this year.
Yes.
And this book is set in 1975 in Times Square, and I was in New York a little while ago, and Times Square right now is not at all like it was in 1975. So you can talk about a little bit about the setting in this book, and then the characters and the overall mission you had for this piece of work.
Yeah. The impetus came from a conversation I had with someone who said that he used to work with a man who was known as the Peep Show king of Times Square. And this man lived in the suburbs of Long Island with 4 or 5 kids and his wife, and they were Orthodox Jews. But during the day he would get on the train or drive into Manhattan to what had happened to the Times Square area in the early 70s all the way to the 80s or 60s into 70s, where it kind of became more of Smutville, USA. There was a certain danger to it, and people walked the streets and their eyes were kind of half there, and you weren't sure what was coming around the corner. Many, many beautiful buildings are in that area that were once theaters that showed first-run films in the 40s and 50s. And to keep up with the Joneses, this character of mine, this father in Peep Show, he needs to get a Peep Show system going in his brand new theater, not in his brand new theater, but the theater that his father gave him. So in other words, you've got this beautiful theater, but the times have changed. A Peep Show window must go in, and this is about this father and his family who live in New Jersey in the book, and he commutes each day to go be a major player in the Peep world of Times Square, New York. His son is very uncertain about what he wants to do, and that's our protagonist. He's 17 years old, and his father's saying, "You should come work for me." And meanwhile, his mother, who's trying to forget her past, which involves the Times Square, has become what they call a balchuva, a convert from non-practicing Jew to very severe sect of Hasidic Judaism. So she's saying, "Come wear the black, come understand my world," and Dad is saying, "Come to Times Square because you don't want to be a Hasid." And so it's two worlds that a lot of people don't know about. The Times Square world, which no longer exists. You were just there. It's very, very inviting place. It's lights and tour buses, and it's changed completely. It's either, you know, Disney-fied or Giuliani-fied, because everything changed after Rudolph Giuliani became mayor. And this other world of Hasidic Judaism, which is much like the Amish world, how cut off from secular life it is, the black garb on girls below the elbows and knees. So that was my goal, is to bring out these two worlds and strangely enough, see if they paralleled.
That's fascinating. There's a great essay by one of my favorite writers, Carl Hiaasen, in a book he wrote called Team Rodent: How Disney Devours the World. And he makes the case that the Disney store in Times Square was the tipping point for the sort of scrubbing clean of that Times Square, but that he liked the seedier, more real Times Square. Was it your goal? You grew up in New Jersey.
Yes.
Was it your goal to sort of revive the grit and texture of that? And what was that like to revisit? You must have been pretty young when this time period you're writing about.
Right. I was born in 1967, so I'm 42 years old. I went to NYU in the late 80s, graduated in 91. So for one semester during that time, I lived in Hell's Kitchen, 43rd and 10th, very close to that area. It was on its way up, but it certainly was not there yet. And so a lot of those textures that I was surrounded by, I took with me. And it was like Jimmy Breslin said that too. I don't want Mickey Mouse. I want the prostitutes, and I want the, all that walk the streets in those days. I don't wholeheartedly agree. I think that New York, being a beautiful, inviting city, is better for New York, and it really, really has changed. I don't need the danger side of it necessarily anymore, but that was very, very exciting, and there was an electricity to it, which is not lost in New York. It's unlike any other place for that. The melting pot of it is unique to other melting pot cities. But I really did, there was something about that I enjoyed, and I did want to bring back, or when I got the idea to create this fiction based on what I knew, it was going to be exciting because I knew there were certain rich textures from those days. So yeah, I found myself there, and because I wanted my own space, and it ended up being in Hell's Kitchen. But I do remember traveling from New Jersey to Manhattan. My dad took us to a lot of Broadway shows, and so I think that also fed into my creative interests. And he would take us to see drama on stage, because in northern Jersey, Manhattan was 20 minutes away. So it's sort of like a suburb of the city. And I think that's one of the reasons that there's a lot of actors and writers and filmmakers that come out of New Jersey.
Is that proximity to the excitement of Broadway and all those theaters?
Exactly.
As a film buff, I'm fascinated by that period in the early 70s where pornography pervaded Main Street USA. It wasn't just Times Square. I mean, we were discussing just before we started the documentary Inside Deep Throat about that film Deep Throat, which was a huge touchstone in popular pornography, I guess. It played 24 hours a day in the Times Square's theaters that it opened in. But even here in Walnut Creek, squeaky clean Walnut Creek, I remember growing up, the El Rey Theater, which was the built in 1937 Main Street theater, was showing Foxy Nurses or whatever between 74 and 76. Over in Concord, the State Theater, which was a downtown movie theater, was the only theater in the U.S. that was showing porn movies and was owned and managed by a church. And it's still a church now. They don't show the porn movies anymore. What about that?
The church prevailed, the porn did not.
Yeah, the church in the rock, paper, scissors. But what about that period of time where there was this sort of public, I mean, certainly that industry has gone all online now, and that was not available at the time. But what was it about, again, that fed the texture of and fascination that you had with kind of recreating that time period?
Well, I guess from the porn angle, when you're writing a fiction, you can't just go straight at it. It's what my editor called the ich factor. You know, like, whoops, too much. So it was a balance of talking about that world. And as you said, Deep Throat came out in early 70s, and it became sort of mainstream. The world couldn't believe what they were seeing, and it was, and so in a sense, it would never be the same in this regard, that we are a Christian country, but we are one that is also sexual and interested, but very quietly interested, and you got to be careful. And so the notion of balancing that world, which we all know to some extent, it's taboo, but it is what it is. It should be behind closed doors to keep it away from kids. That world up against a religious world that In the Hasidic world, as you might have noticed in the book, there's wig wearing. So I thought it was interesting that there was this hiding of the natural hair, because from the Hasidic point of view, the natural hair is quite a modest thing. You want to hide that, but the women now cover it with other hair. So in the porn world, in this theater, there's a great deal of masking of who you are as well. And so I think that was the great idea of capturing the porn world in the 70s, which is just pre-Betamax, you know, and certainly pre-internet, was here it is, it's out in the open, this is where people are coming, the business is booming, and never stopped booming, even with the end of Times Square. And it's a charade, it's dress up, and it's fantasy, and it's taboo. And I guess my goal was to see if some of those things could also be said about some religious worlds that are certainly repressive.
It's a daring melange that you've created there. Have you received any flack, any feedback in a negative sense?
Not really. With both books, I received a little flack from people who didn't read the book but read reviews and then out of context pieces from it. It's important to note that my intention was not to say Hasids have no right. You know, I'm very much in my writing as well, to each his own. There are characters in the book who question some of the dogma that's happening and some of the hypocrisy that might rise from the dogma. But one of my first interviews was with a Jewish newspaper for Peep Show. One of my first interviews was from a Jewish newspaper out of Tel Aviv, and he said, and I was a little nervous, like, here we go. And he said, I think you have a lot of respect for the character that is a Hasid, and I can see that there's empathy there. And I was really glad, because it took a lot of work to, it wasn't about going and bashing Jews or Hasids or anything. I am a Jewish person, I hope everyone knows that. It was more about how it unfolded allowed me to be shown as someone who does feel empathy for someone who's trying to change their life. Any way you need to, if it's not going to harm anyone else, please change your life and find a better route for yourself. Wake up and be happy. But if you're going to grab the kids on your way, isn't it better? Aren't we as parents in the business of creating individuals? And how is that done if you're not allowed to touch a man's hand before you marry him or look in his eyes because of something that's written in ancient texts? The Hasids follow the rules of the Talmud and the Bible and the interpretations of those over the years. So, human condition stuff, really. Right. Not religion so much, but human condition. You know, hear me, let me live, let me learn how to live.